Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the webinar. I'm just going to let Chris Holscher in as a participant. Hello, Chris. Chris, I think you joined on your attendee link rather than your presenter link. So I've just upgraded you, and then hopefully that will mean that you will be able to unmute yourself.
I should be unmuted now. Can you hear me?
And you are unmuted. Good afternoon. Lovely to hear you.
Good, thanks.
Excellent. So I'm going to share some slides because it wouldn't be a webinar if we didn't have slides. Yeah, that is a big part of the fun of a webinar. So I'm going to click that, and then almost certainly I'm going to open up the slides on the wrong machine. I'm going to go into the presentation view, and that's the right way round, isn't it? Yeah.
Looks great.
If I'm lucky, then you can see the presentation and not my notes, which will be fantastic. Okay, so let's get into some introductions. People are still coming into the webinar, but that is fine. We can do some introductions while we do that. So firstly, to introduce myself and our colleagues on the panel. They can even wave or something when they mention. This will help you to tell Chris and Chris apart if you're not familiar with them. Chris Gurman is the Analyst and Influencer Relations leader at Spryker, and is actually a founder of Sage Circle. I mean, he hasn't worked for the company for a long time, but it's nice to have that little thread taking us back in history. Chris has been somebody who especially in the last, I don't know, 3-4 years has played a very important role in guiding the team here. Chris Holscher is somebody who I think maybe even I knew, like back in his days at British Telecom. BT used to be a client of mine for a little while, but he's somebody who I've worked with much more closely through the Analyst Observatory. So that is the research centre at the University of Edinburgh that looks into industry analysts and how industry analysts change the fortunes of high-tech firms. Of course, he runs Holscher.one, the Analyst Relations consultancy named after him. I am Duncan Chappell, as I'm the host on the webinar here. I'm the Sage Circle person in the room. I'm also one of the co-directors of the Analyst Observatory at the University of Edinburgh, which Chris is connected to. And then we're delighted to have Prachi Sajda with us as well. Prachi is somebody who I met September, October. I think we started working with you, and it's really her work that we are basting in the sunlight of today. So Prachi works is a student at Bocconi University. So people that might know, Bocconi is, I would say, the most prestigious Italian university, the oldest business school in the country, and intriguingly has campuses not only in Milan but also in Rome and at Mumbai. Prachi is in Mumbai. Is in India now, but did this research while based at their campus in Milan. Just a few tips and tricks. We've made it into Microsoft Teams, so the people who are here are automatically more successful with Microsoft Teams than those who are stuck in the waiting room and struggling to make it here. But there are just a few things that I would say. The webinar has got a chat feature and a Q&A feature. Please use the Q&A. Don't use the chat. We, as the participants and speakers, are here to share this research and these findings about this research, and we can't do that and read the chat and participate in the chat. So please use the Q&A if you want to communicate with us. please don't use the chat, because then you're excluding us from the conversation. That's terribly unfair because we're the hosts, right? What kind of party would it be where the guests ignore the hosts? We're recording this. If you've got a Teams account and if your Teams admin loves you, then as soon as you leave this webinar, the recording will be there for you. But if that is not the case, don't worry, I've got your back. So I'm going to take the recording and upload it on my YouTube channel. And then eventually the Sage Circle web gods will even upload it onto the Sage Circle website. So the recording will be there. Just a note of context before we kind of talk more about the study. Why Sage Circle and Bocconi? I mean, really, this is a connection that's made through a scholar that we know, who teaches the sales course at Bocconi, to the students in their international masters in business. So this is an international program. I think about 260 graduate students in this program who split their time between the campus in Milan and the campus in Mumbai, and I guess some lucky people who pick electives even go to the campus in Rome. It is one of the oldest business schools. I think the Financial Times just ranked Bocconi in the top 5 in the world for business schools. So it's a wonderful partner. SDA Bocconi, so that's the Graduate School of Business Administration at Bocconi, runs these student projects as a way of solidifying relationships with potential employers from Bocconi, and also as a way of exposing students and businesses to the opportunity of working together and using, you know, leading edge business knowledge to resolve business challenges. So that's been a fantastic thing for us. Just to say something about the study, I promise I'm not going to do all the talking. Our panelists will do some talking, honest. Just to say something about the methodology very quickly, because we've got 6 big points to get through, and we did a rehearsal, and you'll be surprised to hear that we ran out of time in the rehearsal. I know this is the first time people have ever run out of time in a proposal, but we're determined to move quickly through our first half of the presentation. So Prachi conducted this study by conducting interviews. So she connected with Sage Circle as an intern, and then between October and February, she was able to interview 24 analyst relations leaders. Most of these are leaders at either like powerhouse vendors you would think of as very, very large established tech firms, or at hyperscalers. So, you know, like those now very established but high growth firms that have transformed analyst relations best practice, I think, over the last few years, and asked them about what are the hurdles, right? What are the things that prevent them from moving forward? And then of those hurdles, which are the ones that are perceived as valuable to solve, and which are the ones where people maybe aren't going to get much help from their internal stakeholders? You know, there are some problems where, you know, if you say you've got this problem, you can get the budget, you can get the support, you can mobilize internal support, and there are other things that are, you know, maybe that's kind of a you problem, right? And the organization is not going to support you very much. So this I thought was a really intriguing lens, yeah, because there are some problems that are real, and not all of them does the organization want to fix. So that was the value of this approach. Prachi's interviewees, from what she tells me, were astonishingly generous with their time. Some of them are probably here on the webinar, but it was really useful for us. And to give you the too long, didn't read kind of top view, these 24 people have got very different internal organizational settlements, different stakeholders, different reporting lines. So they've got many obstacles, many obstacles. These were the 6 that were most held in common by these stakeholders. And the most important ones are the ones in dark green, right? They're in the top. Right? The ones where it was the ones in grey, they're still quite important because they're in the 6 most important, but they're less important than the 4 above them. Okay. Oh, crikey. we were supposed to go now onto a poll where I was going to ask you which of these 6 is the most important. And I completely forgot to put a link to the poll in the presentation. So that's not going to happen. But I might send it out to you and the other registrants after the webinar, and then I'll share the findings with you. So apologies for skipping the poll. So what I'm going to do now is turn the conversation over to my panelists and to step through these 6. To make it more exciting and more dramatic, we'll do it in a countdown. So we'll start at number 6 with planning and scheduling and work our way through. And the way that it will work on each of these is at first I'll turn to Prachi to just give us a highlight, just a minute or two. What did she hear? What did the interviewees summarize? What were the key findings? And then I'm going to invite Chris, and I'll chip in as well to discuss basically how do we resolve this hurdle? How do we overcome this hurdle? Some of it is what we've heard from Prachi in terms of countering strategies that interview participants have shared, but others will be things that we've seen in our practice. And don't forget to use the Q&A. We'll probably come back to questions at the end of the thing. Okay, good. 10 minutes in, we're rolling. That's good. Okay, let's move on to number 6. So, Prachi, if I can hand over to you now, and then I know Chris Holscher wants to jump in with some thoughts after you've kind of introduced this 6th problem.
Okay, sure. So starting with the 6th problem is that planning and scheduling is the 6th most problem for the analyst relations these days, because they're first divided into 2 parts. One is providing a detailed annual schedule, and the second is about the AR events. So talking about the annual schedule, crafting an annual schedule for reports published by Tier 1 firm can quite be a challenging and a complex task for the analyst relations, as it requires a lot of careful considerations of time, resources, and priorities. As well as scheduling calls with the events also requires a lot of effort because of conflicting schedules and time zone differences. Talking about the AR events is further divided into 2 parts. First is the pre-event planning, and the second is the on-the-event operations. So before the event takes place, the company has to plan in terms of budget allocations, selecting the appropriate speakers, and determining the content that has to be presented. This planning requires a lot of attention and decision-making skills of the AR professionals, which can quite a way take the focus from the main activities and the responsibilities. And on the day of the event, their AR professionals are faced with a lot of challenges of managing multiple operations to ensure the smooth working of the event. This includes coordinating with the vendors, overseeing the logistics, and addressing any last minute issues that may arise. These operational tasks can further distract AR professionals from their primary responsibilities, as they need to be involved at the execution of the event. So now we'll talk about the 5th challenge. Duncan, could you just change the slide?
Well, before we move on to the 5th one, let's have a discussion about the 6th, and then we'll move on to the 5th. So I'll invite Chris to jump in now. Chris Holscher, you had some thoughts on this, didn't you?
Yes, definitely. Thanks. Hello, everybody. Hope you can hear me well. On this challenge, I mean, it's a very practical one. It's an absolute everyday thing for AR people. And let me chime in on the events part first. And maybe my response there is a bit controversial, but in my opinion, running events should not necessarily be an original duty of the AR team, even if it is an AR event. It's a very complex thing. It has a lot of nitty-gritty and detail that you need to take care of, from seating the right people at the right tables and all the lighting and all the schedule and everything. That can be very, very intense and surely distract you, as Prachi said here, from your core responsibilities. And those are really about making your strategic initiatives faster, helping your roadmaps, avoid rabbit holes, reduce risk, elevate customer conversations. And you surely cannot focus on such value amplifying tasks while you worry about all the nitty-gritty of event management. So in my humble opinion, there are specialists for these kinds of things, or even if you can't outsource the event management and you want to handle it through internally, you should try to hand this over to someone in marketing or to a task force or something, so that you can actually focus on your strategic priorities, getting the right people together, making sure that conversations are led in the right way. So that is I honestly I feel quite strongly about that. Because you really would waste your AR talent and your clout that you have within the organization and also with the analysts on a very important day, and waste it on some technicalities rather than on strategic value add. The problem is, if you do that, you get measured against those things, and that would completely distract your decision makers, your sponsors, your people who make decisions about your budget and priorities and all that, would distract them from your value, your actual value, onto something that's completely different and has actually nothing to do with your role. So I'm very sure your CTO is not personally responsible to manage their annual innovation conference. So why should you do the same for your AR stuff? Chris, do you want to chime in on the event side?
Yeah, well, not just events, but just planning and scheduling all analyst engagement, all analyst interaction. I would add two things, Chris, and I love what you said about the events, but planning and scheduling everything to me is a core competency, and I think that's what you were getting at. It's one of those core competencies that if you do it well, you don't necessarily get a lot of stars for it, but if you do it poorly or there's big mistakes, then you get dinged really badly, and not just with the analysts who have to suffer some of the results of disorganization or not getting things correct, but also your internal stakeholders. So your internal stakeholders, you're asking for budget later, you're asking for additional resource. They're going to look at you for your organizational skills and your ability to operate a program that brings in all the stakeholders and all the analysts from outside. So I would say this is an absolute core competency. I can see why it's on the list, Prachi, frankly, because it is so important, even though it's something we run into every day.
Yeah,
and I think it's absolutely an essential part of turning programs from being reactive to being proactive. Let's move on to our fifth point, because I know we wanted to cover the first few points briefly. Budget constraints. I guess this year more than any other, we're all feeling the pain on budgets. But Prachi, can you summarize what you heard from the interviewees?
Yeah. So again, if we define, if we divide the budget constraints, it's in the two parts. One is the proving the impact, and the second is the distribution challenge. So talking about the distribution challenges first, the larger firms face may recognize the importance of AR, but face challenges in the budget distribution due to the funding limitations and the poor allocations across divisions. This may result in inadequate resources being allocated to the AR department, hindering their ability to effectively carry out the responsibilities. Second part is the proving impact. So small firms struggle to prove the impact and the significance of AR to the stakeholders. This lack of evidence can be difficult in in assigning the optimal budgets for the AR initiative. Therefore, both small and the large-scale firms face budget constraints that can limit the effectiveness of the AR professionals in fulfilling their goals and objectives.
And Chris German, you wanted to, sorry, German, you wanted to pick up on this, didn't you?
Yeah. So, budget is the ever-present albatross hanging around our neck, right? There's always more we can do with an AR program. We're very creative people. We want to get other stakeholders involved. We want to get other analysts involved. But to me, turning budget into an advantage instead of a disadvantage is focusing just intently on what you can accomplish with your budget and making it the best possible thing. So going for a 10 on quality in all your engagements and interactions, given the budget that you're allocated. And as you're a good steward with your existing budget and you report adequately, like Prachi is saying here, like many of you have stipulated, then chances are that your budget will increase over time. Clearly, there's nothing like moving the dot on a magic quadrant with your existing budget, right? So showing results and reporting those results in a very crisp, meaningful way will help. But to me, it's taking the existing budget and driving quality from, maybe from a 5 or a 6 up to a 10 with your existing budget, and that's going to help your outcomes. And that's the other thing is outcomes can be inbound outcomes or outbound, meaning your communication with analysts, if that might be just what you do with your existing budget, or it may be your season of growth in your company is just taking analyst input and giving it to product management and your technical firms. And maybe that's what you focus on in terms of quality. So there are definite places to focus with your existing budget, no matter how small it might be.
That's a very good point. I think the trick here is to be really strategic about where you are allowed, or where you decide with your global leadership team where to spend the budget on which initiatives in the company, what is your priority portfolio area, what is your priority in the strategic program, and there goes your budget, your capacity, your love. Now, once you generate a strong value perception with that team, with those subject matter experts, and you generate the outcomes that you mentioned, Chris, I'm sure you will create that pull factor, and people will raise their hand and say, I want that too. And then that's a critical point where you need to be very clear, there is a cost attached. It is an investment. You want the benefits, put in the money. Adding support for extra portfolio areas without extending your resources will cut the support from earlier portfolio areas, from your earlier joining strategic areas. So you need to demand consent of that earlier supported portfolio area strategic program if they are okay to spread your resources more thinly. If your leadership team doesn't get that, you're in the wrong place. So you need to be very clear about those things. But if you deliver those results, as you've said, Chris, you're in a very strong position to actually make that case.
I love that. A lot of the portfolio differences are sometimes it's the technology, and sometimes it's the absolute lead generation and sales. And so you would allocate it differently year to year. So I love that thought, Chris.
And I think this bridges us nicely onto the fourth topic, because this thing about delivering the value that the business is looking for is also a key part of reporting. So Prachi, can I ask you again, let us know what you heard from the interviewees. I know Chris Gurman has got very strong opinions about whom AR should be reporting to, but let us know what you heard.
Okay. So coming to the reporting issues, again, we'll divide the reporting issues into the two parts. One is the problem of dual reporting, and the second problem is how to effectively report to their managers. So first is the dual reporting. In startups, AR professionals find themselves reporting to two bosses, which lead to conflict of interest and duties. This dual reporting structure creates challenges in effectively communicating and aligning the goals and the objective of the AR department. Coming to the effective reporting to the managers, AR professionals often struggle with effectively reporting monthly or the annual AR performances to their managers. They need to provide a concise yet comprehensive overview to the department's activity, and finding the right balance between providing the sufficient information and keeping the report concise can be a challenge for the AR professionals.
Thanks, Chris. I know you've got a very strong view on who AR should report to. I know you think AR should report to the CMO. Pick up on that. I mean, firstly, what do you do if you don't? And then more importantly, why is it so important to report to the CMO rather than anyone else?
Yeah, this is an interesting issue that Prachi uncovered with the study, because you could look at performance reporting in and of itself, and then you could look at organizational structure in and of itself and where you report to or who your boss is. And so we're using reporting in two senses here, but they are related because depending on your organizational structure would indicate what type of performance reporting that you offer, how frequent or how in depth. My experience is the whole goal of analyst relations is to build relations to grow the company, and that's a revenue-oriented target. And marketing is part of that revenue generation, that go-to-market strategy. Now, a lot of people think in larger organizations, there's a strategy department, but the strategy is also almost always connected to the revenue stream, right? So even in small companies, in as much as the AR function can be targeted or can be placed under the chief marketing officer, there's a number of different focus areas you can have with that remit. But to me, that's where the rubber hits the road. I think for the AR professionals that report to communications, there's a way to provide value in that. And I think that generally sends the wrong message to analysts. If you report to the communications group, I think you're sending the message to the analyst, like, we just want to communicate what we have to you. We don't want to get your feedback. And where the feedback can be used in how your marketing messages are written and communicated, and then the information that gets back into product management and product engineering. So to me, the strategy, the outbound and the inbound functions are all wrapped up in reporting to the CMO specifically.
Chris Olsher, I mean, there will be different ideas of what effective performance is, depending on who you're reporting to. Like if you're reporting to the chief revenue officer, it's this. If you're reporting to a communications head, there are certain metrics that communications heads are familiar with. It's very easy for us to report on activity, but who really cares about the activity? People care about outcomes. What are effective tactics to deal with these issues?
Well, you're very right. I just had a really good experience with a client of mine where I'm leading the AR activities, and I'm lucky to report into the chief growth officer. And that feels like the absolute ideal to me because it's a very cross-organizational function. It plays into marketing, it plays into product development, it plays into strategy, and it's very agnostic of, it doesn't prefer one or the other, and therefore it also gets seen as a very cross-functional, cross-organizational function. And that's kind of ideal in terms of being both insights-led and outcomes and outbound orientated in a balance. So I find that as really ideal. The big thing here is that analyst relations, because it has such a cross-organizational power and influence and connection, the important thing is that AR defines its own reporting and defines its own criteria and is not being forced into whatever lens your superior happens to look through. If it's a marketing person, look through the marketing lens. If you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So you need to be clear on analyst relations is a specific function with a specific set of measurement criteria, and you need to define that. Otherwise, you get measured against things that you cannot fully deliver on, or not ideally deliver on. You'll fall short. Whereas other things that you're really strong in are not, visible at all. In my experience, what works best is that you lead with the outcomes that you produce. So don't lead with the number of briefings that you conduct or with the number of inquiries. Those are all important measures for me to understand the efficiency of what I'm doing, but nobody outside of the AR function is very much interested in that because it's an input factor. What everybody else is interested in, Duncan, as you said very rightly, is outcomes. So outcomes as provided, that I hear my subject matter experts could use from, what I've provided as AR input to them, the lines of business, the strategic programs, marketing and comms for sure as well, but lead with those outcomes. And then you can still follow with progress and changes that you made to your objectives and key results in building a strong, powerful, agile AR program. I think OKR is a brilliant management model to that, much better than static project management, static program management. It's much more, apt to how we work and what we do. And then, just note upcoming highlights and the blockers that you need resolved in order to achieve more. And my experience is I get a lot of, pull through that reporting. So it's actually a strength and not a challenge. And that's quite impressive. So strongly advocate for that.
Fantastic, thank you. If we move on to our third one, this is a really difficult challenge for many AR programs, which is customer engagement. Prachi, let us know, what did the interviewees say about that?
So high-tech companies frequently encounter obstacles when it comes to engaging with satisfied clients to gather feedback, recommendation, and testimonials. This can significantly affect the acquisition of new clients, providing valuable insights for strategy and advocacy, influencing the analyst perceptions, and fostering building relationships with their clients. So that is one of the most important, like one of the top 3 problems and challenges that AR firms are facing these days.
Thank you. And just to chip in here, I must admit, I'm kind of reminded of, this soundbite from one of the Kardashians. It's a lot of work, it's very important, and very few people understand how hard it is. One of the things that I've seen in many AR programs is that as they've seen organizations like Gartner start to use customer reviews rather than gathering their own customer references with their own efforts, we're starting to see AR becoming more anxious about the shortage of customer feedback. Not only do the analysts not have easy access to customer feedback all the time, but the AR team often doesn't have easy access to it. And I see programs starting to get into this business of collecting and encouraging the development of more customer feedback systems. But as Chris Holscher was saying to us yesterday, at the end of the tail, there's a complete cow. It's a task that gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think that this becomes a top 3 problem, because in the situation where the rest of the organization isn't solving it, if your organization highly values customer feedback, values customer advocacy, has a reviews program, that is not a pain point for your AR program. But this becomes the top 3 problem for AR programs because it's necessary, but it becomes a problem if your organization isn't doing it. And that means if you do something about it, you're picking up something that the organization doesn't really value. Chris Holscher, I've stolen your at the end of the tail joke, but I know there are more things that you wanted to say about this. And in a way, it's a little bit like what you were saying about events and where is the expertise and what is valued.
Yes. So since we covered that already, let me add another angle here. So I believe the more you include your clients in your thought process that you practice with your analysts, where it supports your end clients' innovation, their transformation, their key initiatives, the more you become a partner of strategic value for your clients. And the more they will be not just accepting, but keen to connect with you through your joint customer examples, case studies, thought leadership papers, etc. So you let them sort of participate in the value that you can access through your subscriptions, through your analyst interactions. You let them participate in that, and you become not a gatekeeper, that's the wrong word, because you cannot share this material directly with them, but you can speak about who and how you regularly discuss with and what you're working on, and share your constant learning and be their access to this wealth of insight, amplified with your understanding and valuing of their needs, their ambitions. And that puts you in an entirely different category of value for them as a partner. And all of a sudden, that thing turns around and they will want to become present with you. They will want to do that case study with you because they value you and they want to play good with you. So that's one thing that I experience, and it works beautifully.
I love the connection, the direct connection with the customers. There's no question there. I would just add that by definition, you work with analysts who are on the phone every day with your customers and with prospects. They get customer references every single day, sometimes 6 or 7 times a day, 500, 600, 800 times a year. So they're getting all the customer references and information they need. The issue is, what about the customer review platforms that came about through in the B2B environment through G2, TrustRadius, and Gartner Peer Insights? And to me, yes, there's a connection because analysts look at those reviews and we have to know about the reviews. But as far as running the reviews program, to me, I would much rather, and I had to get this up and going in 2 of the vendors that I worked for recently, because they didn't have a formal way to get the reviews from the platforms into the Salesforce's hands. So there's very much value for AR to show how they can take that customer review, get it into the hands of the salespeople as a tool, no question. But I would much rather, after you get that stood up, to turn it over to a customer marketing person who does this full time. Because once you get into providing reviews as lifeblood to the sales, they want more, and it takes away your time from your core analysts' work. So I've just seen a value in getting in, building the value, and getting out and turning it over.
Yeah,
Because
100%.
Sorry, Chris, I'll let you carry on.
Oh, sorry. Just saying, agreeing 100%. Plus, there are experts in most, well, at least larger organizations for customer experience and for these interactions, and it should be very close to the core of their work. So I wouldn't take that away from them. I mean, sure, if that doesn't exist, then because I have a big interest in it, I might be tempted to do it myself rather than nobody handling it. But if I can avoid that by having specialists handle it, that would be phenomenal. The best.
Yep.
And again, it's a little bit like events, isn't it? Like if your organization doesn't value it, you don't change that valuation by you becoming the manager of that thing that is not highly valued. You just distract your time from things that the organization values more and has asked you to do. And it might be very important, but you have to problematize it for the organization. Like, I think it's very important to floss, but I'm not going to start flossing other people for them. I have to motivate them to do that for you. But and the way that you do that is by talking about the incredible social proof that reviews represent, the way that customer experience develops the narrative. AR, like the analyst, wants to consume customer feedback, not be the producer of it, not be the curator of it. And I think that's unless you're able to get a huge pile of cash from your organization, there's a very good chance that AR programs end up diluting their resources and having more things to do with the same amount of resource or less. And that is thankless and quite a defeat. Let's move on to our top 2 topics where we wanted to spend most of our time, and we're going to be able to do that. Identification is really a great topic of conversation. Prachi, can you kind of step us through what you heard from your interviewees, and then I know we're all going to want to jump in on this, but I think I'm going to start first with my thoughts after you've spoken.
You're on mute, Prachi.
Okay, now I'm audible. Yeah. So identifying the suitable AR professionals involves evaluating the results, customer influence, and overall engagement of the AR professionals with the client. Failing to target the correct audience result in miscommunication, waste resources, reduced effectiveness of advocacy, strategic planning challenges, and missed opportunities to capitalize on the emerging trends or address to the competitive threats of the company. So yeah, Duncan, you can move ahead with your idea.
Yeah, I think it's extremely significant and a little bit worrying that perhaps you spoke to a highly qualified group of people who are really experienced, and these are people who know how to run analyst relations programs very well. And yet, even for these people, one of the top two problems is the identification of the right analysts. And I think there are a few perspectives here. One is, if we think about the inbound and the outbound, the learn and the earn side of analyst relations, very often the people who are influencing our clients are not very well informed. And the people who are most able to give us useful insights are actually not very close to our clients. That's because there's some analyst in a hut in the middle of a forest who's the world's biggest expert in MEMS chips. Actually, there literally is a guy in the middle of a Swedish forest who is the world's biggest expert on MEMS chips. He's not very close to the buyers, but he's able to give great insights. But on the other hand, I think of when I was an analyst, I would pick up the phone to people and maybe I would have a better idea of how to solve their problem than anybody else available to pick up the phone at my analyst house. But that doesn't mean that I'm like a deep expert in exactly their domain problem. So very often you might have programs that tend to speak to experts because they give great feedback, but then that means you might not be educating other people who are very influential on your clients, even if they're not well informed. In the analyst advocacy study that Sage Circle does, when we look at these 50 biggest AR programs, we see, normally about 10% of the analysts who consider your firm one of their core coverages, they're not hearing from you every month. And that is a problem. The second thing is somebody used this wonderful phrase on a call with me a couple of days ago: dogs not barking. Sometimes there are some analysts who grab your attention, who make a lot of noise, but actually it's not the most important dogs who bark the most. It can be like small irritating dogs who bark the most, and there can be some influence that is just not available to you. And so the solution here is, more than anything else, conduct primary research of your target buyers, your non-clients, to see which firms you are using, right? Like, imagine if you only communicated with Forrester and you never communicated with Gartner and you surveyed your clients, you would find out that Forrester was the most important analyst firm in the world because all your clients say that they use Forrester. But actually, maybe that's because Gartner is recommending against you. So you have to do primary research of your target buyers, your non-clients. That's why win-loss analysis is so fantastic. The other aspect for that is that there are different audiences using different analysts for different activities. And Chris, I know you've got a particular point there about what happens if your go-to-market goals are changing? What happens if your target segments are shifting?
Yeah, Chris Gurman. Okay, so I think there's a couple things here, and I too was surprised this was in the top two, but as I started thinking about it and going over my own situation here and what we've done over the last several years, I can see how this would change. And I think the fact that it changes makes it difficult and makes it a moving target. And the reason it changes is because the business strategy has changed. The whole strategy of most organizations has gone from just incredible, uninhibited growth in 2022, beginning of 2023, to slow down efficiency, profitability. And that business strategy has led to, okay, who do we want to talk to get the inbound knowledge? Who do we want to focus on in the industry, just like you were saying? So that's an important thing. But the other thing I want to say is just being creative. So for example, we had core set of analysts in our technology area, and Spryker's a commerce platform. So we have 5 analysts at Gartner, 2 or 3 analysts at Forrester, and 1 analyst at IDC. Those are our core tier 1 analysts. And then we thought, how can we be creative and broaden that exposure? We were getting a certain number of mentions every year. We went to an adjacent area of coverage at Gartner and found analysts that talk about our technology, not in terms of commerce, but in terms of enterprise applications. We briefed them, we created a relationship, and they started mentioning us in every hype cycle that application API technology was mentioned. So we ended up increasing the number of analysts we talked to by just like a fourth, 2 more analysts, but then we doubled the number of mentions we got in Gartner research, just because that adjacent technology area was more generally published around the world. So I think there's a way to be creative and still come out with great outcomes as you're identifying new analysts. So I don't know if Chris Holscher probably has a thought or two about that.
Yeah, it's well, first of all, I fully subscribe to what you both were saying there, and I particularly like the idea of, you know, doing your own primary research into what your customers are actually reading, what they're working. Just ask them. The better your relationship is, you will probably get that insight from them. There is nothing that should hold them back. I still find it amazing that most of us, and Prachi spoke to really experienced AR people, they very likely will have access to something like Architect or to something like Spotlight Oz and all that goodness that's in those systems, and getting better every day, all the time. So, and still, you know, there's this challenge. My experience is challenge your account executive. Be professionally critical with them. Don't just celebrate, oh, it was so great to speak, you know, to this analyst or so and so. Don't just be overly positive all the time. Just tell them when the fit wasn't perfect. You know, just train them to do a little bit more work on finding the right people for you, on looking into the research agendas, what's coming up, what does actually tango with your particular strategy, with your vision, with your mission, with the priorities that you have in your roadmap, and make them find the right people for you, help you. So be a bit more challenging there. It can truly work wonders. I mean, there are good and less good account executives at companies, but try to do that. And if you need a new account executive, that should be a conversation as well. So be challenging there. The other thing I would add there is I sometimes feel that our approach to tiering, many people's approach to tiering, is a bit monodimensional, and it's very much about the influence an analyst has in the market. And don't get me wrong, that's an incredibly important aspect. But I would recommend to balance that also with how interesting is that analyst to my subject matter experts, because there are times where influence matters more, and there are other times when getting interesting insight matters more. And you can do your tiering through those 2 dimensions, and you'll have to adapt your tiering to the situation in which your organization is currently in, and it may fluctuate, it may evolve, and that will help you, you know, connect the more appropriate people to your SMEs or to your campaigns or what have you. Again, of course, to do that, you need the fit in the first place in terms of the right coverage, you know. But once you have that, don't just go monodimensional. Because analyst relations, if you think about the word relation, it has 2 ends. It has, you know, on the one end, it's the analyst community. On the other end, it's my subject matter experts. So I need not just to make one part happy and couldn't, you know, do everything to work with that one end. I also need to make the other side happy and, you know, make sure I fit into that end. And that's what I mean by at least the 2-dimensional approach to tiering and, you know, getting the right fit.
Yeah, and I think it is so important to understand those 2 dimensions, because, for example, if you think about how interesting an analyst will be to a spokesperson, you know, I'm reminded of this line, you know, you might not be interested in war, but war is interested in you. You know, that sometimes you might have analysts who actually are not very well informed and might. So, for example, think of Chris's analogy of speaking to peripheral analysts, maybe in more general application areas where they're absolutely not experts in your technology, but they've got something interesting to say about their vertical market domain or about their technology challenge. They might know less about what your technology does than you do, and your spokespeople may be bored about that, but their value is that they are close to potential buyers. But I think Chris's point about like generic ideas of influence, I mean, actually, that is also something that comes from tools like Architect and Spotlight Oz. That if you think of an analyst who's said to be more influential or less influential, I mean, that is a generic idea of influence that might work for you, or it might not do. Okay, so we're now at our number one slot on the countdown, which is measuring performance. This brings together really many of the themes that we've spoken about so far. But Prachi, again, let us know, what did you hear from your interviewees?
So the measurement of the AF performances can be done via two metrics. One is the quantitative metrics, the other one is the qualitative measures. So talking about the quantitative metrics, company often prioritize the revenue over the customers and rely more on the quantitative metrics such as number and the positions of the mentions in AR reports. However, there is a lack of definitive metrics that can directly link the AR performance to the revenue itself. This can be challenging for the AR professionals to demonstrate the value and impact of their work in a more tangible way. And talking about the qualitative measures, companies often overlook the qualitative measures such as assessing the impact on the client after meetings, the relationship building efforts by the AR professionals, and the insights gathered by the AR professionals after the meetings. These measures are difficult to measure and can be quite time consuming, further adding to the challenges faced by the AR professionals in measuring the performances of the department. Yeah.
Fantastic. Chris Gurman, I know you've got lots of thoughts about what are the most compelling measures, but they may not actually be the measures that are most widely used. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I have a little story that really brought the light to me what Prachi was talking about in terms of quantitative measures. Taking a poll in a room may not be quantitative for a lot of people. It may be more qualitative, but this happened at one of our user meetings where we had 9 customer executives in a room as a user group meeting for Spryker, and all of our executives were around them and listening to them talk. I was asked to present just to give them an idea of the relative strength of the analyst opinions in our market, just as a point of information. But I was able to ask them how many of you actually used an analyst report to find out about us. And here there are customers sitting in the room, and 8 out of the 9 people indicated that they had accessed the Gartner Magic Quadrant to learn about Spryker. And so with all the executives sitting in the room at the same time, that was kind of a mic drop for me. They haven't asked about performance metrics in the last year and a half, basically, because that was such a powerful moment of measuring the impact of our work with AR. Our dot had moved. It had taken 2 years to get our dot to move to the visionary quadrant, but at that moment, we knew that it had produced a ton of value for the organization. So I guess my point here would be, try to get to the customer as much as possible in getting your proof for how the analysts are impacting their decision making. And one other thing really quickly, I also was able to get to a quantitative measure of impacting pipeline by getting on. I knew I had to get into the revenue stream somehow, so I got the inside sales team to add an analyst relations or analyst impact question into their script as they interviewed all the new prospects that were given them, either hand raisers from the website or leads generated from other sources. And once they found that out, I actually was able to develop a bonus structure based on the amount of pipeline that had an analyst generated interest attached to it. So there's a number of ways, but definitely get in the revenue stream, definitely get with the customers. And I think whether it's quantitative or qualitative, those will be the most compelling measures that you can come up with.
Amazing. Chris Holscher, it looks like we're actually going to finish this on time. This is going to be amazing. But I know you've got some very strong opinions that basically, all the metrics that AR needs to measure its own activity don't really matter that much to our stakeholders. We need to get more insights from them.
Forget it, Duncan. If you ask me the last question, we'll never finish on time.
Okay.
No, serious. I feel I love what Chris has just outlined, and I can parallel that on the insights-driven side of things, which all matter in the same way. So what I alluded to earlier, lead your AR performance measurement with actual outcomes that you've created in the organization. Now, I said that before, but how do you actually get there? And the way that I create those is through what I call an insights, actions, results cycle, an IAR cycle, which is I run a briefing with an analyst through my subject matter experts. So we share information with them. We do a follow-up inquiry with them, bring insights into our machine room, into our, to the subject matter experts. I ask them, so how are you intending to use those data points, those methodologies, those advices, those, whatever they learned? And they will tell me. And I feed that back to the analyst. I tell them, so this is what we're going to do with it. This is how we're working with it. Why or why not, and how. And in a couple of weeks, we touch base back with our machine room, with our developers, with our whoever uses it, marketing, whatever, and ask them, so what did you make of it? How did it change your decision making? How did it improve your roadmap? How did it, what did you learn? Or how was it not useful and why? And we then set up a follow-up session with the analyst and feed those results. There's the R of the IR cycle. Feed those results back to the analyst. The cool thing about it is my subject matter experts, no matter where they sit throughout the organization, tell me how they've used it. Tell me what they want to present back to the analyst. And whether it's positive or negative or anything in between, it's an outcome, it's a learning, it's something that helped us become better, faster, avoid cost, whatever. So I record that, and at the end of a quarter, at the end of a year, certainly, I have a long list of improvements, of actual outcomes, how the entire organization throughout many different departments actually benefited from what insight we brought into their teams. And it doesn't matter whether it's product development or marketing or comms or anything. It's a very rich set of outcomes that I can, with some effort, translate into monetary dimensions and so on. But the best thing about it is that suddenly a whole lot of high-profile people throughout the organization stand behind these numbers and say, I have done this. So that's a very powerful sign, and I never had to argue or discuss budgets again because people say, I want that too.
Perfect. Let me point to the participants to a few resources that are going to be useful. If you want to find out which of these hurdles are your hurdles, or if there are other hurdles for you, we've got this fantastic tool called the Sage Score Diagnostic. It's been around since 2008, 2007. It's been developed carefully over the years, and it's now available as an online audit, which you can take in the comfort of your own home and get results. If you'd like to find out about that, send me an email. That's my email address, and you get scores across 5 different areas of analyst relations practice, and then you get graded according to where you stand, according to the 100 or so other companies that have taken the study in the last few years. To deeper dive into this, my colleagues at the University of Edinburgh and I are organising again the Analyst Relations Forum, this annual gathering, which has been in London, it's been online. This year it's going to be a physical event at the University of Edinburgh that will be live streamed. And also some of the research from the Analyst Value Survey, this survey that shows which analysts are being used the most by your clients, will be presented at the AR forum in June. I'm going to put up my email address here. Just again, contact me if you want to discuss any of these hurdles. I'm going to stop sharing now so that then I will be able to see if there are any unanswered questions in the Q&A panel.
I was able to answer one.
And there is only one, so that's fantastic. Job done. Okay, so we can wrap up our webinar. Chris German, Prachi, Sachida. One day I'll learn how to pronounce your name. I'm sorry. And then Chris Holscher and our audience. Our audience all stayed. Oh my goodness, they all stayed. That's amazing. Thank you so much. We'll put the recording online, and we'll speak to you all very soon. Okay.
Great pleasure. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.